Okay, thank you, everybody. Welcome. This is the Town of Andover Board of Finance special budget workshop meeting for Wednesday, April 10th, 2024. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God,
Under God,
indivisible, with
visible,
liberty and justice for all.
and just for all.
Hey, thank you. We will go on to agenda item 2, which is public speak. So Linda, looks like you're the only member of the public
I'm all
outside
set.
of the board. Anything to add?
Nothing to say.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to our workshop then. I assume, I'm not sure, I don't know if Kimberly or John will be joining us. But we'll go ahead and get started. As far as I know, they will be. Yeah, Eric, if I could share my screen, I don't know if it's enabled yet or not.
Hang on 2 seconds. Okay.
Okay, you should be seeing the Excel sheet now. Okay, so yeah, as I was mentioning, I think we had a spirited discussion about the director, the wages for the director of the community center, and I think that the consensus was that we would we decided that we would kind of leave that in as it was and leave it to see what feedback we might have gotten during the hearing. And also, and if we don't have any, then we would maybe leave it to the public vote in the town budget meeting. So that's kind of where we left that. I don't think we addressed anything specifically or suggested any changes in the rest of the line items for the community center. Did anybody want to review that again?
All set.
A lot of this is swag, we know, because it's not up and running, so we don't know what electricity is going to cost or the supplies and everything. And as Eric had mentioned in the last meeting, we do have to do an initial stocking, so that's going to potentially take a little more than it might in a normal run rate year, but it's going to all be new, so we'll figure it out. Okay, if we move on to the 4199A section, this is advertising. This is the legal advertising, primarily, I think, advertising the votes and the various meetings that need to be posted. Probably some, other openings and things. So Eric, we're looking at no change there, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean those are guesses that fluctuates. So we have to do legal notices for any land use board, anything that comes before significant that comes before a land use board requires a public hearing. Town meetings require advertisements. The budget requires advertisements. Registrar stuff. There are a lot of reasons. The state makes us advertise an awful lot of things. We typically use the River East because it has a wide circulation. Everybody in Andover gets one for free. And it's a relatively low cost advertising means. It's almost 3 times as much to use the JI for the same ad as it is for the River East. We do occasionally have to use the JI because there are some things in the land use realm that require 2 notices and with very specific times between the 2 of them. And we can't satisfy that if we do both of them with the River East. So in those cases, we'll do one in the River East and one in the JI. But that's, I'm not anticipating we have a lot more use this year. So as long as they don't raise the costs for their advertising rates, we should be okay.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to insurance. So we've got a 4.9% increase in insurance. As Eric's note here, Kerma has a 3-year lock-in. We can't exceed 5%, maybe lower, but probably prudent to assume that rough increase there. Anybody have any questions on that? Or Eric, do you have anything you want to offer beyond that?
Yeah, and since I got that note, The two things, so our insurance bill is comprised of essentially three major things. The first is Kerma workers' comp. The second is Kerma liability and automotive. And the third is the fire department's ESIP insurance. So we don't have firm numbers for any of those. ESIP has, when we asked them, said they anticipate a 13% rate increase to 22,000, but we don't have an actual contract. Kerma has said we are going to be at the max of our 3-year lock-in. And the reason is on the workers' comp. We did have one fairly significant claim from Public Works. That was cardiac related. And we did have on the other side, on the lap side, we had a significant claim for the plumbing failure in the school because that required an emergency cleanup because there was a lot of sewage in the crawl space. So basically, based on this year's claims, they're going to be. So what I'm saying is that our insurance, that number should be okay, but it's not going to go down.
Okay. What's ESIP? Is that like emergency services insurance plan or something?
Yeah, a lot of towns do that. They separate out the so the fire department still runs off of our workers' comp, but everything else related to their equipment is covered by ESIP.
Okay. Any other questions for Eric on the insurance? Okay, hearing none, we'll move down to benefits. I know probably some of this is an estimate, but some of it's probably hard numbers you've got. Eric, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, so the biggest chunk of that is, Social Security and Med, that just relates directly to the raw income that we have. Unemployment compensation, we don't have firm numbers. We never do at this time of year. But based on the last couple of years, we've been putting quite a bit more money into that than we've actually getting charged. So that's why I reduced that down to 5,000. The biggest chunk is health and dental insurance. That still needs review. Cheryl and I plan on sitting down and going over that because I gave her the formulas I used to do it and she had some concerns with it. We know overall our per person healthcare increase is going to be around between 16 and 16.5% per the consortium. What we don't know is obviously that also includes the addition of one completely new employee. And there's something wrong with my math and I can't figure it out. So I've told Cheryl as soon as she gets back, which will be, not this coming week, but the week after that, we're going to sit down and review all the formulas because there's still something wrong. It just mentally, it doesn't add up that should be a 42% increase unless we had last year's numbers wrong, which is possible.
Well, we were down quite a bit, health dental. So is the extra employee you mentioned, is that the community service director?
Correct.
Or the
That would be
community
the
building
director.
director? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other questions for Eric on this?
So we should obviously flag that to come back to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good point.
And the other thing I would just mention on the unemployment comp, so we've been under expending, we've been budgeting too high, you've dropped it by half. Do you anticipate we're sort of going to soak up that a little bit and then maybe meet in the middle and, in future years we might need 7,000 or 8,000, whatever, instead of 5? Or do you think 5 is the real number?
I mean, I think 5 is the real number. Our expenses the last 2 years have been about 5.
Okay,
One a little bit more, one a little bit less, I think. But there's no,
right around
I
that.
don't
Okay.
see any real rhyme or reason to why. Uh, you know.
Okay, I was just curious as to whether how we were handling it. And now that you mention it, it's a silly question because this isn't a fund. This is operating budget. So we're not
Right.
soaking up surplus. We're just budgeting accurately. So thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
I have a question, Mark. I don't know if, am I visible? I
You
had
are
a-
now, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I had a heck of a time getting in. I don't know, I tried to get in the meeting maybe 7:01, so I apologize for my late arrival. I was spinning, I don't know, so I kept logging out and logging in. So I don't know how much of the meeting I missed, but I thought I had put something on this. There's the disability insurance policy. Eric, which employees are covered under that disability policy?
Pretty much all the full-time employees.
Mhm. I know I had emailed you a while ago. I wasn't sure um, I had a question of it. Obviously, it's not a big amount, but I knew that it's disability insurance, I guess, for if someone is injured or can't continue in their job, that is the policy.
Yeah, it's a long-term disability policy.
Right. And then I
Don't
knew,
maintain short-term disability, but we do maintain long-term disability.
right. And I never, in looking at all the contracts and everything, I had never seen that as a benefit. So again, I just was waiting for the question to get answered. So I figured I'd ask it now. So we provide it even though we don't have to by contract or anything like that.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
And like I said, it's not a big dollar amount. I just wanted, thank you.
right.
But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I'm going to say that I would never have accepted my contract without some sort of long-term disability. I would never have accepted it structured the way it's structured. And the whole concept behind eventually taking the entire town to just PTO instead of separate sick time plus personal time plus vacation time accrual, that implies that no employee has that sick time bank to cover them during extended outage, which is basically what long-term disability policy. So I think either you go one way or the other. You either go back to traditional sick time for all employees, if you're going to consider getting rid of it, or you keep it. That's how I would look at it as an employee, certainly.
Right. And I remember when we were in the contract negotiations talking about that very thing. And yeah, like my town offers it for employees, but they can buy it for themselves, like just like any other person can. Yeah, again, I don't want to make too big of it. It's not a big line item, but I had emailed you several times and I didn't get the answer, so I figured I'd ask now. Thank you.
Sure.
Yep.
Is it something that there's employee contribution and then we cover something? Like, I know in my company, I buy whatever I don't even pay much attention to it. It's just a line item on my benefits. But every year I select it. It's like a 60% salary for long-term disability. And it's negligible to me, but I'm assuming under the hood that the employer kicks in something too. Is this just our share?
I don't think they
No, that
did.
is the total cost.
Okay, so it's a little different.
To
Okay.
contribute to that.
Generally not super expensive stuff.
No.
Oh no, absolutely not. It's nothing. I don't have any problem with it. I was just curious.
And the only reason I bring it is when you're sitting at a negotiations table, you just like to, and I got to know the contracts quite well. So I just had never seen that in there. Whereas like in my contract, we're able to, like Rob said, you get to pay a portion, the town covers a portion. But okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the insurance or benefits? sorry, benefits and stuff we're talking about. Okay, hearing none, let's go down to the old town hall. So we have an increase in the electricity anticipated cost based on actual expenses. This says 22-23. So looks like trying to more realistically estimate the expenses. It's only a difference of less than $500, but it is there. And we also have a fuel oil budget added in, which looks like it got missed last year. So occasionally get a fill up this year because the tank is down. Okay.
So
Rob, you have a question? Sure.
Yeah, just the old town hall, that's is that the museum? When we say the old town hall, that's the museum area, right?
that is correct. That's the museum
Okay.
building.
Not the building we're demoing. Okay. Just checking. Okay, cool.
Eric, did you have something to comment on there? Or?
No, just that's the building. We don't fill the tank every year because we only use it occasionally because it's only open in the winter occasionally, and it's nominally an unheated building, but they do fire up the system if they're going to have a Saturday open house. So, but I did look, we're down to just about a quarter of a tank. So Scott said he typically fills every second to third year. So we're due to fill the tank this year.
Okay.
Not a
Further
very big
questions on
tank.
that area? Okay, we'll move down to town garage. Just a couple of reductions here. Otherwise, it looks like it's flat. Anybody have any questions on the town garage costs?
I was just wondering, Eric, is there any plans long-term? I just happened to be talking to Jay today and, understanding, the work that place needs. Is there a long-term plan for that garage of any type?
So there's kind of three things on my medium-term radar for that building. The first is something for the exterior walls. Martin has recommended that we simply lath and stucco the walls as the easiest way to preserve the exterior. I have a little bit of concern with that because I think at the same time we do it, we want to consider increasing the insulation of that building too. In my head, I would probably use an exterior foam insulation, a rigid insulation, and go over that with vinyl siding. But, I really need an engineer to weigh in on that because I want to make sure whatever we do doesn't affect the long-term structure of the building. And since we're talking, some of those sections of the building go back to the 1850s, you really have to be careful about the permeability of the mortar and the bricks and stuff like that. So that's one. The cold storage building definitely needs a new roof. It's got 2 layers on it already, so you can't re-roof over it. It would have to be torn down or torn off and re-roofed. So that is something that we should do. That portion is not leaking. The front portion with a flat roof is completely trashed. And to be honest, the best thing we can do with that is just tear it down because structurally it's not sound enough for us to really want to spend a bunch of time fixing it up. And it's marginally useful space. So that would be my, kind of the 3 things on my radar list for that. The fourth thing is a replacement of the generator for that facility because that is that generator's a little older than I am. It was basically an Army surplus generator that they got about 30 years ago and that they've been using ever since. But the problem is it's not a stable enough electrical generator that they can't run any of the computers or anything like that. It's too noisy a power. They can use power tools and they can open the garage doors and stuff like that, but it's not fully functional. So at some point we ought to consider a generator upgrade for that building also. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was just wondering with all those things, like what is the plan to fund all those things? Like I don't see anything in here for like how do we fund all that? Is or just gonna be a big bill we get someday?
Well,
Building
no, I mean,
maintenance
I was planning on using a bigger chunk of this year's building maintenance funds for public works.
Oh, okay.
However, the Board of Selectmen has made it clear that they want to do the gym floor project and the downdraft lit fans for the gym out of that budget also. So, you know, 35,000 of my, you know, my 100,000 is already spoken for. So that's going to reduce my ability to do stuff with that. But those are the projects I'm kind of looking at in this next iteration. There's also a chance I can use some LoCIP funds for some of that too. That gets harder because if I use LoCIP funds and not internal town dollars, that makes me I have to go through SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Society or office, and you know, I'm sure they're going to refuse to allow me to tear down the front facade if we touch any state funding for that. So,
gotcha. Just
yeah.
a quick note to is when I did that tour, was that a year or two ago? I forget. We had that tour that Jay set up, and that'd be something I think all the Board of Finance people would definitely, if he does another one, should go to just to see what condition that building's in. Anyways, that's my thoughts.
Yep.
Real quick, two questions. One, the generator and replacement thereof. Is this I assume is a gas generator, not a propane?
It's a diesel generator.
Diesel, yeah, okay. Because there's already going to be fuel tanks there, right?
Right. They currently run it off the same, you know, basically they're running it off the home heating oil
Okay.
tanks there.
Okay. And then because it's the same stuff, right? And then the second question is I have a vague memory from CIP meetings from a year or two ago. Was this the building that needed regrading and work on its exterior walls to prevent moisture getting up and wrecking its foundation? Not its foundation.
Get some electrical
like,
work done out there too, right? So
yep, it definitely does need that.
Okay, so there's a to Bill's point, like there needs to be kind of a whole plan for this building that we should talk about in the coming years.
That was going to be my question. I wasn't able to make that tour and I really wanted to. I drive by there every day. I'm just going to stop in or ask Jay if I can come see it because Bill, overall, is it in terrible shape? I've heard they've done so many improvements inside too, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, no, Jay's done a lot of work on that place and he's cleaned it up. He's done a great job, but he can point out the shortcomings.
Right.
And I'm not here and try and remember all of them, but you know, as Eric just talked to, there are needs for that building. So anyways, I was just wondering how we plan to pay for some of those. And
this
Eric,
is one of these things where we need to kind of figure out what the overall plan is, and then the building equipment fund is going to need funding commensurate with that at some point.
Especially, you know,
prioritizing,
yeah. Well, when Eric says, you know, part of that building's from 1850, that kind of makes you think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know?
Like
so,
yeah. Understood.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have to go see it for myself too to kind of get a better because they've talked.
No, and don't think that we haven't been putting a fair amount of money into that building. That building has had some really extensive electrical upgrades. Both bathrooms have been fully remodeled because they were,
remember that.
you know, absolutely disgusting. Not that I take credit for that. There's been a new locker and storage area.
That's what I heard about. Yeah.
We've poured a bunch of concrete in there to level off the floors. We've done a complete lighting upgrade in the building. We've replaced the roof of the main, you know, area. We've added another door in the back. So we have been putting quite a bit of money into the building. We're just kind of doing it over time as we have excess money available in the building maintenance fund. Sure, there are some big ticket items, and it's just a question of prioritizing, and looking for what things we can fund without tripping, requirements of state.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and last question. The diesel tanks there, are they ASTs? Are they above ground?
Yes, all our tanks are above ground. There's a big
In a
diesel fuel
containment?
tank, double wall fuel tank outside, and then the oil tank is an above ground indoor tank. A big one, but
Yeah,
Gotcha.
no, that's the main question. I'm just thinking about legacy issues from past years. I mean, when you talk about a building of that age, um, even a building 100 years newer than that, I'd be thinking about what was there before and what happens if you stick a shovel in the ground.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just a thought.
absolutely. I mean, I could not believe that place would not be a brownfield if you ever wanted to use it for some other occupation.
The
I
good
mean,
news and the bad news is it's right next to a river.
right.
And the old joke, the solution to pollution is dilution, comes into play. But yeah, so when we think about this plan, we'll think about that too, but that's down the road. Thanks.
Okay, other questions about the town garage? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the old firehouse. So
got a
Eric,
question there.
we've got reductions there with a note that hopefully we can demo and avoid this ongoing cost.
So
Anybody have any?
Eric, a question about that. I know we had a plan to rebuild that, Eric, and I know part of that money was a grant that's kind of based on us spending money on the museum, I believe. If
Right.
memory serves, can you talk to that just a bit and where we are with that?
Sure. So that's kind of a cluster. I'm willing to admit. So I still don't have final approval from SHPO over our what we had to submit to SHPO is this giant set of documentation about a building. Because anytime you tear down a historic structure, you have to have like all this documentation about what you're tearing down. So we have submitted that to SHPO like 6 or 7 months ago. And when I followed up with them several months ago, they still hadn't reviewed it, which does not make me happy. We're the other thing that affects us dramatically on that property is that when I went to the agency that deals with prevailing wage in the state that has ultimate authority over that, I asked for a ruling and was told that cannot be considered new construction because there's an existing building on site. And I asked for a legal interpretation because, as far as I'm concerned, if you tear down the entire building and you don't reuse the walls or the foundation or the slab or any utilities or anything, you're building something new, right? You're not reusing anything over maybe the dirt that was under the building. But they have said in no uncertain terms that that's new construction, or that's not new construction as far as they're concerned. The head of that agency told me basically verbally that unless we were doing something in primeval forest, it was going to be it was not going to be considered new construction. Which is nuts, but her husband, is the head of the Union Trade Association in the state of Connecticut. So, I mean, their agency head is as pro-union as you could imagine. So, that is going to drive our costs up for that project. I'm not sure how much. I had anticipated, I had budgeted based on it not being a prevailing wage job and not having to deal with SHPO. You know, my thought at this point is I'm about to submit for congressionally directed funding to pay for the community center and the generator that will cover the community center, the fire department, and the town hall. And if I do that, then we have plenty of excess money in the multi-use building fund to absorb any increase in costs in that building. So I have a kind of a plan in my head of how I can make this all work. But if that doesn't come to fruition, then I would be going back to the board at some point saying, hey, here's what our actual costs are. Here's what it's going to cost the town. You know, do we proceed or do we bag this?
Gotcha.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Luis.
Just out of curiosity, what does the electricity actually, what are you actually paying for? What electricity is actually in that building because it's a vacant building?
So we haven't dropped the service. And the reason we haven't dropped the service is that when we go to do the asbestos abatement, we need water and we need electrical service on site to do the asbestos abatement. And the reason I didn't drop it a while back was because I was anticipating having done it already. And frankly, as soon as SHPO gives us the authority, we will go out to RFP for the demo contract. So I'd like to do that regardless of what else we do with that space and how we finish it off. We're going to demo it anyway. So I've been keeping the utility on in anticipation of that. I certainly hadn't expected it to take me as long as it has to get to this point. But anything to do with the state takes a long time.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Hopefully we'll be to some point where we don't have to include these line items. All right, auditor actuary, we've got a small 5% increase assumed. We don't have a contract, obviously, so seems prudent. Any questions about that?
So
None.
one of the things I would say is that since it is the Board of Finance's, decision to hire or not the auditor, I'm assuming since we've gotten to this point, you're happy in that you as a board want to renew the services of the auditor for next year. If so, at your next regular meeting, you should probably motion to that effect, because the state's already bugging me to declare who's our auditor for the next cycle.
Yeah, it makes sense. Can you make sure we get that added to our agenda for the April meeting?
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, town attorney. So we have a note, we have a 7.1% increase in the budget. It's 14,000 to 15,000. It's not a big deal. Increase in fees from Dennis O'Brien, 1,000. Rest is for labor, attorney, and occasional land use. So, all right, nothing. And then we have not a revaluation year, so we don't have too many concerns with the assessments, legal fees. So that's staying flat. Okay, any questions on this?
None.
Nope.
Okay, we move on to town engineer. We're flat here too. There's no questions. We'll talk probate court. Looks like we have a small increase, $100, nothing significant. Okay. Moving up to the Capital Region Council of Governments. So that's what CERCOG is. Can't remember. Capital is Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Is that what CCM is? I don't know what
Correct.
cost is.
Yeah, Cost is Council of Small Towns.
Ah,
They're
right.
kind of like the lobbying arm for small towns in Connecticut.
Got it. Got it. So we have, these are all membership fees, I assume.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's small increase. Don't really know what all of them are. So, okay. Seems reasonable. It's not a whole lot of money.
Yeah, CCM has not actually passed a budget yet. So I don't have that final number, but it's not going to be much of an increase.
Okay. With no questions, we'll move on to Public Works. So not really a whole lot of change here. As a vehicle maintenance up 15%, you know, it's a couple $1,000. Tires accounting for the difference, as Eric mentioned. Tires are bloody expensive. I just had to replace a 2-month-old tire because I got a big piece of metal in it. And I think the general costs are just really high just because there's still the raw material cost of carbon black and stuff is still driving the cost of tires up. But anyway, that's my personal observation, so I can relate to that. Increase in diesel.
Algicide.
Yeah, so because we never drain the tank completely, we do get our diesel tested twice a year. In the winter, because it's an exterior tank, it's still cold enough here that we need to add the anti-gel stuff to it. So that stuff's fairly expensive. And we also do add algicide to the tank just to prevent algae growth, because algae does, believe it or not, happily live in diesel tanks. And it's really it really messes up the engine if you start sucking algae into.
Do not want that in your fuel injectors and your fuel filters.
No,
No.
It may be helpful when you're trying to clean up a mess, but that the critters like to eat diesel, but you don't
Right.
want it in your engine. I don't think I realized that we needed to do that consistently. Okay.
Yep.
Noting this increase in signage costs under the equipment line, what signage do we put in
So
on the side of the trucks or something?
no, that's like the the basic stop signs and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. So road signs,
And
yeah, they replace.
Yeah, and we have more signs stolen than you would think. We actually spend an amount of money that annoys me for replacing signs that get stolen, signs that get deliberately run over, cones and barrels that get thrown in the river or thrown somewhere where we can't find them anymore. It's quite annoying, actually. It's
How many slow children signs can we possibly have? Sorry. That's going back
funny,
to my
Rob.
fraternity days. That is irritating though. So we're having to replace consistently a few signs a year.
Oh yeah, way more than that.
Wow.
And part of it is that we are slowly upgrading our stop signs. A lot of them don't meet the new reflectivity standards. So there's some stuff we're building in just because of its age.
Yeah.
But we actually have a bunch of stuff. There's a couple spots where we've consistently had problems, like Cone and Gilead, that intersection.
I didn't
we
do
get
it.
those signs stolen and taken away on a fairly frequent basis because 30 years ago it was only a two-way stop.
Yeah.
And now we made it a four-way stop, and that makes people angry because they remember the good old days when they didn't have to stop. So they just steal them. They think, well, there's no sign. Now I don't have to stop anymore.
Oh my
That's
God.
what's going on.
Oh my God. We have to
Yeah.
document this
I
stuff.
live on Gilead. I never realized that. That's bizarre.
Yeah. We had the
I
same
figured
problem.
it was, teenagers being idiots. I didn't.
Yeah. And we had that problem on Long Hill, where Long Hill and Hendy intersect. That used to be yield in all directions, and then they put a stop sign on two sides, and that got people angry. So those signs
Okay.
got stolen a lot for years.
That is definitely different. I was just down there the other day. Yeah, I'm like, I don't think it was like this. Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to
I
suggest
have
we
a-
kind of stay focused and try to
Yeah,
move
I have a
along. We got a
question,
lot to cover. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark.
So I have a
That's okay.
question. Thank
Yep.
you. Eric, just can you remind me, I mean, just a brief, because I was looking at the salaries that make up the public works salary. I understand we have Jay and then we have, I believe, a 4-man crew so that they
Correct.
can. And did someone go, I know we have a maintainer 1, 2, 3. Did anyone go up a level in the past year that maybe was a 1 before? I don't want to name names. I thought I saw more 2s. It just looked like a bigger bump than when I was looking at the year. So did anyone have a level raise?
Not. There's no level of change projected in next year's.
Okay.
One employee, Rich, was bumped up to maintainer 2. I don't
I
know
think
whether
that's
that was last year's budget. I think that was last year's budget that he got bumped to maintainer 2.
And I think we created, or I'm not we, but there's a new, wasn't the 3 added or something at one point? There was just 2 levels and now there's 3, or maybe.
No, actually, there's always been 4 levels.
Oh,
But we don't ever essentially put anybody in the 4th level, because
okay.
the 4th level was what we used before we had a public works supervisor, when we still had a union position holding that top level kind of manager position.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
we haven't
Okay.
had a maintainer 4 essentially.
Yeah,
It's
that's fine.
basically maintainer 1, maintainer 2, lead maintainer, and then like supervisor essentially.
Okay. All right, thanks. There was some bump somewhere that I couldn't get to make sense to me, but I'm sure it's fine. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments on the Public Works section? Okay, so we'll go down to snow removal. Not really a lot of change here. Sanding equipment's gone up a little bit. Small hand winter equipment needed. So I'm sure there's a small hand sanders and meals, new contract increase. I assume that was meant to say contract, not contact. But
Yeah, correct.
yeah. Questions on this portion?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, I guess we'll move on to transfer station. So just very minor change in the wages. Maintenance, you got 20%. There's just another $500, not a lot, but noting here, we're gonna need some pavement repair. I assume that's just patching that the Public Works does. Eric?
That is, we do have some issues there which occurred last year. Basically, we got a pretty bad rat infestation, and the rats had gotten through the side of the block walls, and they were hollowing it out back there, and pushing the sand out the cracks so they can make nice big nests. So we have added a pest removal service to the transfer station. But
Okay.
So we will have to do some patching, is what I'm saying, but nothing super significant, nothing Public Works can't handle.
Okay, good. Questions, anybody?
Why would the electricity go down?
Because
Good question. Maybe actuals or something.
so first of all, last year we were going into a year where the electrical costs were spiking. And it was kind of hard to determine where they were going overall. So we've kept that high for a couple of years, but we've got enough historic data since the time that we have changed over the electrical system and rebuilt that I'm confident that we can get away with the lower number there based on past usage.
So they'll probably be consistent for next year as well.
Presumably, unless, unless the utility company, unless we get a spike either in supply or delivery charges from the utility company, which is always possible.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
No,
Okay, move on to recycling. So we have an increase of 7.1% hazardous waste. Have note there that the Mid-Near Rock contract, one more year to go on the existing contract. That's our contractor for picking up hazardous waste. Also increase on antifreeze, used oil. Tire pickup, okay. So again, not a lot of money increase here. You're talking about, less than $800 all in.
Mhm.
Anybody have any questions or concerns?
not there, no.
Okay. Ground care. So we have mowing, that's flat. That's the contract with Clerco and estimate from the Heat Parks and Rec.
You spelled that correctly too there, Mark? Contract?
Yeah.
Eric, is that for the field?
That is that line item is mostly field related, but it also covers the town's regular mowing, which we sub out to Andover Landscaping.
Okay, because aren't we buying a new mower, tractor?
That's the roadside.
Sorry,
Yeah,
thank you.
That's the
Right.
roadside.
Yep.
Okay. And then the old cemetery maintenance, the grant that's in there, was that grant for more than a year? I thought that was, was it a 2-year grant?
So generally speaking, and I'm guessing, but generally speaking, we've been able to get that grant pretty much every single year. So I'm assuming that we're going to get that. But we're only going to spend that line item if we get the grant.
Good,
So-
that's my point. Yeah.
Right. If we don't get the grant, we're only going to spend, we typically put a couple $1,000s in town money into the old cemetery maintenance.
Yeah, that's what I remembered. And we only bumped it up to the 7 because we got the grant and we wanted to account for it.
Correct.
Okay. But then, all right. Is it a little misleading to the town that we're putting it as an expend? I don't know. I mean, I know you'll remember it, I'll remember it, but we're counting it as an expense as we need 7,000, but
Right. But,
yeah,
that's fund accounting,
I
in a
understand. Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm curious. Are there any grants out there for any type of beautification, especially when you're putting in a new building and there's new plantings and things like that?
Not that, I suppose you could go after maybe Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. I think if I wouldn't have done it necessarily for the beautification portion. I think if we don't get the congressional set aside, I'm going to go after money from the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving for the kitchen for the community center and see whether they'll cough up the money to fund that. Because I know they funded that in other senior centers. But honestly, I've never really looked for grants specifically for beautification.
Well, when you say limited,
Are out there.
are you putting in trees or are you talking flowers for limited plantings?
So right now, we are, for the community center, we are going to put topsoil down and grass seed and maybe one tree in the middle of the turnaround. And that's it. Everything after that has got to come out of the beautification budget because we don't really have another source of funding for that.
Okay. It'd be nice to maybe get the town involved in something like that. Because I remember when the Hartford opened up in Windsor, I was working at the old facility, and they actually had employees come over and do plantings. And it was kind of a cool thing where people got involved with what it looked like.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I was
typically
thinking
when
that would be a nice thing too for the town and the public, maybe, you know, people that like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yep.
I mean, beautification is a beautification committee. That's not
Right.
money I spend. That's money, uh, the beautification committee spends on keeping up the plantings around town.
Right.
So I think you could certainly, have involvement with the beautification if there's specific things you want to accomplish. I mean,
Okay.
in truth, Kathy DeRosa's sense of design is a hell of a lot better than me. So I tend to rely on her for, and let them do whatever they want to do in terms of plantings. And that's what I would do here.
And I can tell you, she's always looking for more hands. So if you have more than ideas and you have muscle, she'll take it.
Okie dokie.
I'll come help her.
All right.
I'm not good with the design
sense.
sense, but I can help.
Because right now, in all honesty, it's a lot of old ladies and me. But yeah, we could always use more help there. Not just opinions, but help.
I resemble that remark.
Okay.
All right. Shall we move on if you guys are okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, street lighting, we've gone down from 10,000 to about 5,000. So Eric is noting need better numbers for electrical cost. Did we just over budget last year?
Yeah, we did. And for whatever reason, even when, our costs should have spiked really dramatically last year because the utility company went up like 48% on their on their supply costs, which is a little more than half of the total cost for electricity. But for whatever reason, it was not reflected in our street lighting bills. And our street lighting is the one thing where we pay for the electricity through Eversource, not through a third-party supplier. So for the life of me, I don't know why that didn't go up significantly last year, but it did not. So in fact, it was lower than the year before, which makes no sense. But, we put together 12 months of bills, and did kind of a historical look at it. So unless something changes, 5,000 seems appropriate for that, or, a little bit more than that, 6,500.
Eric, did we use the same level of kilowatt hours we've used in the past, or did we like switch over to LEDs and use less power?
So that's a good question. They did when they replaced the lights here in front of town hall, they did put LEDs in those. So that might account for some of that. We'd already done LED street light up. All our street lights are LEDs. The only non-LEDs we have now are the existing spotlights on the athletic fields. So
that's my only thought as to why we might have seen a reduction when you have the rate increase, is that, even as my power usage in my own home has changed over the years, one of the big things I think is that just about every light in this house now is LED, and they just use dramatically less power. So maybe that's it. I don't know. It was just a thought.
Yeah,
I mean, high pressure sodium. I was going to say high pressure sodium versus LED is a huge, huge difference.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Okay, so are we good with this one? Should we move on?
Move on.
Okay, the custodian costs, we have a pretty significant cost here. And as noted, I think we talked about this before. There's a salary increase plus the increase in hours for completing the community center for the year.
Mm-hmm.
So, questions there?
Is that regular maintenance? Or is it because of all the construction that they're doing right now?
No, it's
budgeting for the annual cost, right, Eric?
you're gonna have to clean it a couple of times a week. Somebody's got to go in and do the floors and clean the bathrooms and do all that. So that's what that cost is. And you know, a year from now, that may be adjusted up or down once we understand how often it's going to be used, and what the maintenance schedule has to be. I mean, I sat down with Willie and went over the building and said, okay, you know, how often do you think, let's assume, you know, we have this thing open during the week, and we're doing evening programming too. You know, how often do you really think you need to maintain it? And he said, well, I think probably you're looking at 2 days a week. You know, and so we kind of budgeted for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this along with the whole section on the town community center is that we're throwing darts at a board right now, and once we are a couple years into it, we'll have a much better idea.
Seems reasonable. Other questions? Okay. Resident trooper. So this kind of is what it is. We don't know what the cost is going to be, right, Eric? You want to elaborate?
Yep. I mean, so assuming we keep our existing resident state trooper, looking at the actual costs and overhead associated with that employee, again, the state police doesn't make the final determination on their rates till later in the year. But presuming they don't change that radically, we can live with the same budget.
And we've been at roughly 140 for the last couple of years.
We were at 140 last year. It dropped down a few years back. We had a resident state trooper that had a lot of seniority. And he was a relatively more expensive employee.
Yep.
When we got Trooper Nessie, our costs dropped pretty significantly because he has much less seniority.
I do remember that. So yeah, it's always a crapshoot. But if we keep our current trooper, we expect the cost to be flat, roughly.
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, fire department, fire commission. So we've got about a 9.4% increase. This is actually one where we probably wouldn't have been. I don't think we talked about having somebody from the fire commission come here and explain this. I don't know, Eric, if you can address it, or we need to have somebody come here and kind of talk about it or give us an explanation in writing.
I mean, I can, if you continue on while you're looking at that, I should be able to pull up what the fire commission gave me for justification for that.
Hey, Eric, I just got a text from Joanne. She said, can you have Eric let me back into the meeting, please? Are we allowing people?
Oh. Yep.
Oh,
All
wow.
right,
I didn't realize she even dropped off. Yikes. Yeah, I don't know how we didn't flag this one. It must just not have been quite at our threshold where we took our top 10.
Yeah, it wasn't the top.
I think in retrospect, we would have wanted them to come and talk to us. Oops.
Can someone let me know what we're discussing now?
We're on the fire department at this point, Joanne.
Thank you. Took me forever to get back in.
Yeah, we just talked about resident trooper. I don't know when you dropped out, but we just noted that we really don't have the cost until we're certain who the trooper is, and that
Thank you.
so now we're on the fire department, noting that they had a pretty significant increase request at 9.4%, which is the equivalent of about $15,000. So we were wondering if Eric had some of the rationale behind that, or if we should have somebody from the fire commission come and explain the basis for that request increase.
Thank you for that, Beck. I was at the town hall yesterday, so I have a question and that would be great. It would be nice to see which line items make up. Eric, are there people in the firehouse every day? I should know this, being a town resident. Are there actual people there, or?
No, we don't. No, The answer is no. There are not people there all the time. Often, whoever the officer is that is on duty will stop by at least a couple times during the day, and then you have call outs. We typically have at least one call out for the ambulance service a day, so you will often see that going out. So if you see a bunch of cars parked there, that's usually what that is. I have their actual request, but I don't have their breakdown. I can either get that from Wally, and I suspect it's my problem because I'm sure I got it from him. I don't know why I don't have it in my budget folder. Or you can ask, and I will have Wally attend the next meeting if you want to discuss the fire commission's budget directly.
That would be my suggestion, is that we just kind of skip over this and ask for him to come in and explain, because it's a significant part of the town budget. It's a significant increase. We should know why.
Sure.
Agree.
Yeah. And Mark, I asked that question too, because I kind of want to understand how it works too. Yeah, it was interesting to me because I was thinking I would have walked over. Yeah. Just like, is there one person on a salary? But we'll see that next time.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you talk about almost a 10% increase, you want to know why.
Yeah, that's a significant amount of money. Yeah.
Well, if it's significant, not $100, but
right.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the entire fire department costs us roughly the same amount of money as a single resident state trooper in a vehicle.
Don't even go there.
Don't
Eric.
play with me. Don't get me started.
We all saw that. We all saw the public response when there was discussion about removing the state trooper from the budget before. So
no, actually, I wasn't going that way with it. I was going to say that overall, the fact that we've been able to maintain a fire department as inexpensively as we have, there are not many towns that have been successful staying 100% volunteer for fire department and ambulance services. And I do know that it would not be a surprise if in 4 or 5 years they no longer had enough members to run it as completely voluntary.
And that's what I want to know, the history, and I'll do that on my own. I'm fascinated by it, so I want to know how it runs. And you said you get about an ambulance call a day?
Yeah, probably. Sure.
And that's the vast majority. I mean, I looked into this a while back, and it's been decades since fire departments spent most of their time actually fighting fires. It's almost always weighted toward medical calls.
Right. Accidents.
Yeah.
All
right, we should.
Okay.
Car accidents,
Yeah.
medical calls. Those are
But yeah, I mean, it'd be good to
medical.
just hear from Wally. I mean, I don't expect to grill the guy, but just to find out. We've been going up slowly, and then this is a bit of a spike. So.
Yep.
Okay, we'll table that discussion for next week then. Just going to highlight this as something to talk about. Animal control from NECOG went up 20%, couple grand. So you have a note here, Eric, agreement with the Hebron fell through. This is the bill from NECOG to do this.
So we had tried to set up a consortium with 2 of our neighboring towns to get away from the regional animal control operation, just because they're so far away from us that it makes it tougher getting support with Andover. And if they pick up a dog, the closest the dog is going to be is in Norwich. So a resident has to go a long way to get their pooch back, which, is a good learning lesson, if nothing else. But,
that's what I think.
True.
But, the other issue is that the services they provide are limited. A lot of ACOs will deal with roadkill, that kind of stuff, and nuisance wildlife, and we really don't get that out of NECOG's animal control service. they do the absolute minimum required by the state, and they
Mm.
bill us based on that. But ultimately, the three towns couldn't agree on figuring out how to do it. We even had a little outside grant funding that would have been applied to a new three-town organization, but Hebron backed out, and without Hebron, the other two couldn't pull it off. So
Oh,
we're just stuck with NECOG as
That's
our only
unfortunate.
real.
that's too bad. I mean,
Does
Really
Hebron
is.
have a pound?
Yeah.
Is that the issue? Is that Hebron would
Yeah.
have the containment facility?
Yes, and that is part of the problem, is that the state, in their infinite wisdom, made a decision last year. They changed the standards for animal control facilities. You know, they changed the fencing requirements, they changed the run requirements. Animal control facilities now all have to have air conditioning. So there's a bunch of stuff that got put down on. That's why we've kind of decommissioned our pound completely. So we wouldn't even use it in an emergency, because it would cost us too much money to meet state standard. So that's part of the thing that's killing, you know, and that's part of the reason why NECOG has increased in cost this year, because they also have to, their pounds now have to meet that increased requirements also.
Got it.
I'm
Was the
guessing
other
this is
town
Joanne again.
Marlboro? Was the other town Marlboro, or was it a different town?
Columbia was going to be
Columbia.
Andover, Columbia, and Hebron.
Okay. All right, suggest we move on from this. Sounds like we understand that one. I just got a text from Joanne, said her computer shut down. She's going to try to log back in.
Man, she's having trouble tonight.
Fire marshal, minimal increase, 3% on the salaries and a little bit on the
Yeah.
dues memberships. Is $25. It jacked up the percentage. Any concerns over the fire marshal section?
Nope.
Okay, senior citizen. So we've got a small increase in the coordinator. I think that's what this is. Yep. And then senior lunch jumped up quite a bit. And Eric has the note unknown as we shift to the community center. We keep consistently underfunding this. Last year we spent about $5,500. So, you know, it looks reasonable to me.
We underfunded it by a lot.
So obviously food costs have gone up pretty considerably.
20%,
the seniors have managed to fundraise a pretty significant fraction of the cost of the senior luncheon program. But year over year, we're not fundraising more, but our costs have gone up a lot. So even though the total cost of the program has only gone up like 30%, the cost they can't grant fund or can't fund has gone up a lot. So that's really what we're looking at.
But I mean, we should be budgeting as to actual expenditure.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah.
let's get real.
Yep.
It's just, yeah, it's a eye-popping percentage, but it is what it is.
Right.
And same thing with the
There's a
programs.
reason we built that senior center and we do these programs. Yeah. So.
Right. So the next line item also 50% again, is that just we're consistently overexpending?
Yeah, for the programs.
The programs.
Yeah.
Well, so what I'm trying to do is whoever walks into the job of running the senior center, I want to give them enough of a budget, because one of the things I want to do is I want to get away from the range of programming where we are now, because what we're capturing is the less active senior population, you know, and I want to start increasing some programming that catches the more active portion of the retiree population. And I think we're going to need some extra money if we're going to do that. So I'm trying to give them enough funding so that they can do that. as part of the new community center / senior center.
Realistically, yeah. Okay.
Any further questions on the senior citizens budget? Okay, looking at senior transportation, we got a big jump where I think talked a little bit about this maybe, but Eric, you want to just kind of hit the highlights here?
Sure. Every year I ask department heads for the budget, and pretty much every year they return a flatline budget from the year before. But it's not a realistic budget because every year we end up pulling money from somewhere else to supplement that. So I finally said, okay, I'm sick of putting up with that. And I took the last year and we looked at how many total driver hours that we ran last year. And we also realized that our oldest senior transportation driver, not oldest, but person who'd been driving us for a long time, had been hired at a really low salary, an hourly range initially. And then all the subsequent employees had been hired at a higher rate because that's what we had to do if we were going to get them to, so we still have one driver that's making like $4 an hour less than all the other drivers. And she's the driver that's been driving us for the longest period. So we're going to level her hourly wage with the rest of them. And then, because I think that's only fair. And then look at how many hours we actually drive with this program. Now, it does look like I've filled out the paperwork this week for the, because we do get reimbursed a portion of our costs, and we can get reimbursed up to a half the total cost. But it looks like they're actually capping how much they're going to give back. So we're actually probably going to get back around $10,000. So we're going to spend 44, but about 10 of that's going to come from a grant. So under this scenario.
Okay.
Mark, can I ask one question? I'll
Yep.
make it very quick.
Yep,
I missed, it looks like, are you able to scroll up a little bit? I know you're on the transportation. So, the resident services coordinator position, I know you did you have a discussion about that at all? Was that the stipend I was asking about last
Yep, that
meeting?
is a stipend.
Right, and I never want to single out employees. There was some, I'll probably circle back to it next week, but when I went after the meeting, I went looking at it and I thought that person, I understand those, the serious things that they take care of that you talked about. Obviously, the town has to have a person to take care of that. But I had thought there was some other duties attached to that was senior transportation and things that were going to be moved to the community center. So maybe I'll take, so is this stipend just for those smaller things, or is this person also helping with the transportation and all of the things that were listed on the budget in the past?
No, I think there are several things by law we have to have.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at resident services coordinator as being the municipal agent for the elderly.
Yeah.
That's one state required. They're kind of a key part of our hoarding task force. They deal with all the renter's rebate. They deal with all the fuel assistance stuff. And there's a series of things along that which are lumped into that. We used to have a standalone employee that worked just a few hours a week that did that.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem I had with that is people would always come in asking to talk to the person, and then you got to say, no, that person only works Wednesdays from 3 to 5 or whatever. Mm-hmm. So one of the reasons why I wanted to assign that to one of our full-time people mm-hmm. is because when the town hall's open, most of the time I want somebody to be able to walk in off the street and actually speak to the resident services coordinator. So that's kind of why I've structured it the way I've structured it.
And I get it. I know we've talked about it before. I think it is a good service, or I imagine it's not, like you said, it's not an all the time thing, but it has to be available when it's needed. No, thank you for clarification and circling back. That was one of the things I was going to touch on. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. We talked about the senior transportation. If there's no more questions on that, we'll go on to the health officer. You got a small percentage. It says the Eastern Highland Health District budget has been adopted. So I guess that's pretty solid as our contribution.
Yep.
I don't see anything really to discuss there. Amplify mental health services. So you have a slight reduction there. That's just, again, $30. That's not really affecting anything significant.
Yep.
Social services. So we're jumping up a little bit. This is a request from the Access Community Agencies, what you've got there. So it's $600. You're jumping from 400 to 1,000. Again, it's a big jump, but not huge dollars, I guess.
Correct. So Access Agency is one of our primary social services agencies. It's one of those things that a town is required to have, but by using a regional organization, which Access is, we satisfy that from the town's perspective. The vast majority of their funding comes through the state, not from the town. They ask for a pretty modest portion of their budget from the towns that they serve. So they did ask for a lot more this year, though.
I'm not surprised.
Okay. All right, if no questions, I guess we can go ahead and roll down there. AHM Youth Services. Yep.
Yeah, we ever in the past we always used to have AHM come and present. Were we doing that this year?
You all got an invite to their budget presentation, but nobody took them up on it.
Oops.
Yeah, I think
my fault.
Eric, I felt bad. I was supposed to attend and said I was, and then, I didn't put it on my calendar, so I do.
Okay.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah.
They always send us the spreadsheet or something.
If I had to guess, it's ongoing, mental health kind of stuff. We've seen this the last few years.
Mhm.
Yeah, they usually send a budget over, and then as Eric mentioned, they have a budget presentation, which if you could go to, but it's pretty self-explanatory generally. They do a pretty good job of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I sure as heck don't want to run my own youth services agency.
Yes.
Because that's complicated.
Goodness, no. They're great.
You don't want to do that, Eric?
No, HM is excellent. I just, we due diligence.
Yeah.
All right. So if there's no more questions, we can go ahead and keep rolling forward. We have the selectmen. Looks like we've got a reduction in the salary amount.
Sure. Mr. McGuire has indicated he is not interested in drawing a salary. Therefore, that's removed from the budget. So that's
okay. She took it out. Yeah.
Flat line for 4 of them. And he does not take a salary.
Okay. Board of Finance. I mean, we had the clerk wages. We don't really see any change there. We just budget where we are.
Yeah, I'm not anticipating upping the per meeting stipend. So as long as we keep running roughly the same number of meetings, there's no need to increase those budgets.
And we're fine. We haven't really used the legal.
Yep.
Right.
We have that was kind of
we were jumping at shadows a little bit.
Spirited
discussion
a couple of years ago and
decided it made sense at the time, but we've moved beyond.
Yeah. Conservation Commission, it's all flat. I guess we can move on if nobody's got questions about that. Board of Assessment Appeals, we've got some minor dollar amount increases in the salary and some training costs, $400 or so. I mean, Anybody have any questions on that? All right, hearing none, zoning board of appeals flat, we get flat until we get them down to the recreation commission. We've got a little bit of a bump, couple $1,000, $1,500. So outside facility rental. So this says wiggle room for incoming center director. So I guess, Eric, what you're suggesting is we might want to bump up the budget slightly in case with the new director, we have more external activities that would require external facility rentals.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm just overall, I want to give them enough of an operating budget the first year that that they can function and they can legitimately increase their overall programming. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I mean, it's really going to be highly dependent on who we get for the director.
Yeah.
Community gardens going up high percentage, not a ton of money. Is that something that's taken off? It's really growing.
They seem to be doing more work just in terms of the
pun intended
plan, but it's not a huge amount of money, but what's that, Bill?
No pun intended on it. It seems to be growing.
That was not intended, actually. That's sad. I wish I had intended it.
They've got nice raised beds and they've got some watering facilities and stuff there inside. So,
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. I'm curious, it's doubling, a little more than doubling of the budget. So, I mean, it's small in dollars, but if it's going well, great.
There's been a lot of volunteer work over there too.
Oh yeah.
More is needed, unfortunately. But I think it's a good mix with the center. I mean, it's all in the same.
I think the good synergy and dynamic could work there well. So
I have a question about the rec center, the recreation. Will that eventually go away after the community center person takes charge?
Will what go away?
The recreation commission?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I want the recreation commission to, make the decisions, but I don't necessarily want the rec commission to have to do all their own scheduling. I want somebody doing that for them, but I want the rec commission working with them on what programming to provide and things of that nature, which is very similar to what's happening now.
All right.
Okay.
So we had a bunch of zeros and negatives coming up.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Slightly
Like it.
reductions, and zeros.
Love it.
Yeah. See zero.
Yep.
Get down to the
Bridge and culvert fund. Here we go. Capital.
There we go.
Oh, boy.
All right, let's see where we are. The big one. All right.
I mean, that absolutely makes sense. We've been talking about the culverts for a while.
And Eric went over that when we had our
the whole issue where the requirements have changed for doing those projects and the result on the cost has been repeatedly discussed. It's just unfortunate.
Before we even get there, we've also got a 9.6% on the fire engine fund. So that could be something the fire commissioner talks about as well.
Is that associated with the new truck though? Is that just math?
So
part of it. I think that's less than 100 though. It is 80 something per year. Can't remember what now.
Yeah, that's part of it is that we have a good amount of money in the fund right now, and the cost per year for the truck for the next 10 years is going to be around $125,000.
Yep.
So if we keep it at $125,000, we're essentially saying the only thing we're ever going to do is the truck.
We're just treading water.
I don't think that's realistic. I think it needs to go up a little bit. But, we've also told them that we've given them basically 2 really big ticket items in the last 4 years, essentially. So they're going to have to keep it really reasonable about what else they get.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me in that, if we don't do this, we're just treading water on the lease cost of the trucks we have. So if the purpose of these funds is to set aside, hopefully for the future, at least that's my goal. So I, for one, if we have room in the budget, and we'll see how this goes at the budget hearing and the town meeting, but if we have the room to do it, yeah, I'm strongly in favor of trying to pad this a little bit so that we have some money going in there that isn't just a pass through for the lease cost. Um, and then
You're
yeah,
not,
And
you're
they
there's a
not
have,
culvert
proposing any
that's
changes to this at this point, are you, Rob? This
no, I'm not.
137.
I'm supporting it. I'm saying I think
Yeah,
it's the right
yeah, okay.
call. It's a bit of a, it's a non-negligible increase. It's not crazy though, and I think it takes into account our real needs. Uh, the fact of the matter is that the last truck that we got years ago, when we first developed the fire equipment fund capital plan, that truck was slated to cost $750,000. It almost cost, I think it was like 950 in the end, because costs went up, and stuff happens basically, and we have to plan for the future too. So that makes sense to me.
Okay.
The culvert
Uh,
fund, yeah. Sorry.
flat on equipment, for flat on road improvement, tree removable. Bunker Hill Bridge, we zeroed out.
I wanted to ask about the tree removal real quick, if that's
Yep.
okay. How are we
sure.
doing, Eric, generally? Just, surface level, quick comment. Like, how do you feel about where we are in the trees?
I think we've been, incredibly successful. And I look at that and I look and say, consistently on these big wind events, are we having major issues? And the answer is no. Whereas 5 years ago we were. And then I also look at, because we have 5.5 miles of rail trail running through the town, and the state does not proactively cut trees on the rail trail. And I look
Right.
at it and say, how many trees do we have go down in 5 miles of rail trail versus how many do we have go down in 34 miles of our town roads? And we tend to have less problems on our total town roads than we have on 5 miles of rail trail. So I think we're doing very well. But we're also doing well because we're playing really nicely with the utility company. And
Yeah.
while you see a budget of 50,000, our annual expenditure on tree removal the last bunch of years has been more like between $100,000 and $120,000 in tree removal.
Yeah,
Um,
because we're mobilizing with Eversource in
correct.
conjunction with them. And and I'll back that up. I mean, I've lost power once in recent memory, whereas it used to be a fairly consistent thing. So,
Right.
no, I just wanted to double check on that, but yeah, I think that works. That's good.
So I would just, when I look around, Eric, I still see a lot of
Mm.
trees, even on like Wheeling Road, the roads I drive the most. But I see a lot of ash trees and dead trees that worry me that they may not fall on power lines. So maybe Eversource isn't going to address them, but they certainly worry me as far as falling on the road. Someone could get killed quite easily. It happens. So is there a plan in place to like finish a lot of, like, I remember they did Wheeling Road years ago, and there's a few that we just stopped because we ran out of money, I guess. I think you said to me at one point. And I'm just like, they're still dead standing there and could fall on the street. Like, so I'm just wondering is $50,000 mostly for the rail trail, or do we have a plan to finish cleaning up a lot of the dead trees that
No,
are
none of that.
down?
None of that 50,000 goes into the rail trail. The only thing, if we were to address a tree on the rail trail, it would be because it's down and Public Works can cut it up. If we need money for, that's a state responsibility, not a town. All our money goes into town roads, not to the rail trail. We may use a little manpower on the rail trail from time to time, but not contractor dollars. Um, no, so we in the past we were using distinctive tree care, and we were doing kind of big swaths where we had an extraordinary number of dead trees in a short distance. And we just took the worst sections and went after them section by section. And now we're starting to get more specific. And we're shifting, and we've been using a different tree company, and just going after where we don't necessarily have areas where we've got 100 trees in a mile to take down. It's more efficient to use a regular tree crew than distinctive with the big grapple saw. And I think going forward, we're going to use a mix of both of those, because either one could be more cost effective depending on where it is. We've had to spend a lot of money doing Cider Mill Road. We had a ton of really large trees that required 100-foot bucket truck, which those are expensive per day. But it was too tall for us to get with the grapple. If we'd have done it 3 years ago, we could have done it with the grapple because the trees were dead but intact, and now they're more fragile. And now if we grab them with the grapple saw, they just tend to come apart, and we can't lower them safely. So we're mixing and matching depending on exactly where we are. But it's an expensive proposition. However, I think we're doing a great job compared to all our neighbors. We've been very successful with that tree program over the last 4 years to 5 years.
It just seems like.
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Go ahead,
Joanne. Go, Bill, because I have a different fund. You can ask about the trees.
It just seems like it's not a lot of money for the amount of trees that I see that still need to be addressed. Just doesn't seem like enough money there.
It is scary when they're leaning over. I'm afraid they're going to fall on someone or a car or something too.
I mean, if a car's going by and a tree falls, man, hits the car, you're dead.
I know. It's so scary. You hear about it in other towns or on a highway randomly, and I think of it too. It's not, yeah.
Sure.
All right. Can I move on? The other fund I was going to ask real quick, Eric, I know that this year we funded the road improvement. Is that, yeah, level to last year. What was this past year? I know we overspent and had to transfer some money. What was that, like 184, or was it, do you remember the amount we transferred out of maybe the old library fund or something? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I want to say I would have to look back to give you an exact number. I think that was about 140,000.
140. Okay.
Yep.
Because we got extra work done. I know it was in this current year that we're in now, this fiscal year. So that's something to kind of think about down the line, depending on, I know we were ahead of the game with that because we had to transfer money into it. All right, thank you.
Okay, the big one really we have going on here is the Bridge and Culvert Fund. So we've got a 75% increase from $100,000 to $175,000. Of course, the note here needed for Lake Road at Basola. That culvert is in bad shape, and the plan was to replace that. I don't know, Eric, anything more to add to that?
No, I mean I was talking to the engineer today. Actually we were discussing ways to reduce our survey cost for that project, which I think we can save a little bit of money on that. It's just replacing culverts today is stupidly expensive. And the requirements are just the old days of digging a hole and dropping a couple squash metal pipes in and building a facade on each end and calling it good are done and over with.
I guess my only question is is this enough? Is this the year to push even a little bit more? Given our sort of good luck with the RAM budget situation, should it be 200,000? Because this isn't going away. We have another project after this one, right?
No, there's no question. And in fact, Public Works has been working the last 4 days to repair damage on a culvert on Bunker Hill that has scoured out so badly we had to go in and repair kind of the outfall of the culvert. We're going to face a fair bit of expense for bridge and culverts, for a bunch of years going forward. There are kind of three that are critical right now. This being one. The second is the one on Hutchinson Road. I think we have a plan in place to get away without replacing that culvert by basically convincing the state to allow us a curb cut onto Hutchinson on the other side of the culvert, and then basically just abandoning the existing and removing the existing culvert. Because there's so few houses back there, it just seems absurd to be spending, between $1 and $2 million replacing a culvert that really only accommodates several properties. So
as long as we can get them access another way.
Right. And so if we can come up with a workaround to dump them off on Route 6 farther up, we're going to do that. And just not, and then the next culvert we really need to go after is one of the big ones on Bear Swamp Road. Because that one is failing. We've had sinkholes there before. We're watching it, but we know that one is in, pretty poor shape. So after this one gets funded, what I've been talking with the engineer Nathan Jacobson is basically waiting at least a year and then submitting to the state local bridge program to replace that one also. So that as soon as we're done with this one, we already have the next one pre-approved into the program, and we can start putting money aside for that. So
my comment remains basically just that not only am I in support of this increase, I wonder if we should even go a little further. But that's my only thought. We know we have all these issues coming up. So
yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd prefer more money in that program.
Well, yeah, if we get a budget passed, we would always like to put as much money as we can. But this is strikes me as one of our biggest needs.
Correct.
Yep. Any more comments here? Slight reduction in the building maintenance fund, AES capital fund. We've talked about this before. We voted to kind of fund this out. There's $100,000 in there, and 50,000 in the open space fund too, from Planning and Zoning Commission. And we think we kind of talked about this in a prior meeting as well.
We did.
I don't know if anybody has any further questions on that, on those items.
Mark, can I just, sorry.
Yep.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Obviously, I take the meeting that I wasn't at the beginning of the meeting, but I figure we're going over all the line items and such. And then I would think in a next meeting, we're all going to give our thoughts on things overall. I mean, we're just kind of, I'm not taking this as I'm rubber stamping everything. I'm getting an overview of everything. And then
what I would suggest is if we go along, we did this in last week's meeting. If there was something that, people feel like really ought to be adjusted, let's do it. Let's adjust it. Let's address it now. Or, we can do it next meeting too. It doesn't have to be done this meeting, but I think if anybody wanted to, make a suggestion, we seem to have some consensus on a few adjustments early in the beginning parts of the budget. But we can certainly come back and address it, No,
I'm glad I was able to say that. I know we did kind of go along that way. I think
this is a lot of informational stuff. Right. So yeah,
so I'm just kind of digesting it. Yeah. Sorry.
Time to think about it more too, if you want to do it talking
Well,
future meetings.
digesting it all, looking at the big picture, talking about it as a group. I mean, all of us, will have our opinions on what we think, so that I wanted to ask you directly, and it seems like we can do that. We're going through all of this. We'll all come back with, what we think.
Yeah,
'Cause
I think so.
yeah.
But if anybody had any specific, proposals to make, we could certainly talk about those too. But, absolutely, we can continue to do it
And
next
I'll
week,
have
and then,
them
yeah.
reflective or whatever, and it won't be like every line or anything like that. No, thank you. I just wanted to, I
Yeah.
feel like we've done that in prior years.
So, with respect to the Bridge and Culvert Fund, I don't know that I'm ready to make a motion around this or anything, but I guess I just food for thought for everybody.
Mhm.
Just based on the needs that we know are coming down the pike, how do we feel about that number? Do we think it's right? Do we think we want to, would it make sense to entertain a motion to increase it to 200,000 or something like that? Just kicking it around. Again, I don't have a strong opinion at this moment, but I just have a doubt as to where we are with that fund, and given the cost increase that we're seeing, is that enough? It is basically my gut feel, especially in this budget cycle where we are in a reasonably good place in a lot of other areas. It's just my one.
I agree with you, Rob. I think that's another one that bridge and culvert fund should be increased, not only for contingency of what might happen, but to start putting even more money away for the future, because these are expensive. And if, I mean, Eric, hopefully we get the okay from the state to take a cut on Route 6. But if that didn't happen and we had to do that project, wow. So it seems to make more sense. I'm not a type of guy that likes to spend more money, but sometimes you just have to. And that's one of the places I would think I'm in agreement with Rob as far as that goes.
I agree with Rob too. And my take on this and why I asked the question, that's where we make our priority decisions, in something like this, because when we have our big picture talks, there's, I have had people come to me. So I have thoughts on the budget overall, not in a big way, but we're going to make our push of what we think we should do. But I have no problem with putting more money in that too, whatever's needed the most. And then when we get to our big talks or what we think we want to put forth for the town after we do our job as the Board of Finance and fine tuning it and everything, maybe this would be a year you take a little bit away from the roads that we already had done ahead of time, put that extra money that you are, because we had to transfer such a big amount, kind of,
Yeah.
and then put it where we need it. We know those bridge and culverts are needed. So maybe deduct a little bit there, pad the other side. I'm not saying we can do that in every instance, but in this one, it might work. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a fair point in that we did overexpend last year by like 150K, roughly speaking. I remember that transfer too. I thought actually, Joanne, I thought your number was right, but I think we might have been plugging two different things, and one of them was the road over expenditure. But whatever it was in the 150-ish
Significant,
range.
yeah.
Yeah, and I on the flip side, I want to keep ahead of our roads because
I know.
we have plenty
Me
of
too.
work to do there.
Yeah.
Me too.
And that's why, and I'd like Kim to be present too when we have the big overall talk too, because I think she'll
Yeah.
have some thoughts, and that's why, I agree with you though. I have no problem putting more in that one.
Yeah, it just that's the one fund of all of these that gives me some concern going forward, just based on what Eric's telling us about the project costs.
Yeah, and we've been talking for years about being underfunded on our roads and bridges. So
Yeah, specifically the culverts. I mean, it was a real jump.
yeah,
Eric came to us a year or two ago about that. And we're just facing the fact that a project that we would expect to spend $500,000 on is now almost $1 million project, that kind of thing. So, we have to plan for that. But other than that, I mean, I really kind of like this budget. I think it's a good solid. I think we've gone through, we've done a good cut at it. And, that's one I would just flag as everybody kind of just think about. And whether this is the year to push a little bit on that. And if we get to town meeting and people are like, nope, we want to cut the budget, well, there's a place we could drop back if we have to. But right now, I mean, it's already, granted, we're already putting in a significant increase. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like, just based on what we're hearing from our experts on the matter, we're gonna have. I don't want to get in a position where we need to do a bridge and we have to bond it or something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah.
So, yeah, we are pretty much at the end of the budget here. The mill rate calculations are going to be what they are, so we don't really need to worry too much about those right now. Just as a point of procedure, though, I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that we have 2 more meeting dates before our town budget meeting. So we have next week, the 17th, and we have our regular Board of Finance meeting on the 24th. One of those two meetings needs to be a budget hearing. So it would either be next week, or I guess my preference would be the following week for the Board of Finance meeting. That would give us an opportunity to kind of finalize what we think would be the proposed budget next week, making any motions to make changes to that.
Good.
And then have the hearing on the 24th at the Board of Finance meeting then. The following week would be the public meeting, May 1st, for the town budget meeting. If the budget passes at that meeting, then the referendum is the 14th, yes.
Right.
So
it's like a 2-week trigger.
Yeah, so we basically need to have a recommended budget by the end of our meeting on the 24th, I think, or else we'll end up calling some special meetings, which I think all of us would prefer to avoid. I don't think we're that far off, so my guess is we'll be able to zero in on a proposed budget for the town budget meeting as of our meeting on the 24th.
So it would be super ideal if we could get Wally to come to our next meeting.
Yeah, I would agree. If we can get him on the 17th. Does anybody else have any other departments or anything they feel like they need to hear from? Yeah, I don't think we identified.
That's the only one I got.
Yeah.
And Eric, Mark, would you mind, is the bridge and culvert one that you can highlight so we remember to come back to that, or like we did other lines?
Yeah.
Just
so
I
had in my
on
phone that the 24th of April was going to be our public budget hearing.
Perfect.
That was my assumption. Which I might have to miss, by the way. I apologize, but
what date is that?
24th of April.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think that's likely to be our budget hearing, and that's our first pass through with the public. And unfortunately, I may be able to make it, but I may have to miss it. I have my kids that night unexpectedly. My ex-wife.
That's good. And I was going to mention also, I will not be available for next week's budget. So, Joanne, if you could take the meeting, I'll be on it.
So you're not available next week when we're
the 17th. The 17th.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's a slight chance that I might be able to join, but honestly, if you guys knock it out and you have you have changes you want to make and you get some agreement, you just make motions about accepting those changes, proposed, to accept the budget as currently shown, and you can go ahead and approve that. You certainly don't need it without me. You will need a quorum. You need 4 people there. So as long as you have a quorum, you're good.
I'm good for next week. I just want to be clear. 2 weeks from now.
Week after,
potential. Gotcha. And again, I'm iffy. I may be able to make it. I just have kid duty that night, and we'll see.
Okay.
And then I should be able to make the actual town budget meeting.
The first.
So,
quick question:
Joanne, Joanne will have this version of the budget that's been marked up, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll send it out to all of you after the meeting tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Just it shows the highlights and the things we wanted to talk about.
Mark, before we close tonight, just so that we know where we stand right now, are you able to go on the mill rate calculation tab for us real quick? since we came to the end.
Yeah, let's
Like
look at that.
this
I agree.
budget and Eric, is this up to date as far as, I don't think
Yeah,
there's been.
1%, little less than 1%.
Yeah, it should be calculating through correctly.
0.91.
Because I'm
So-
gonna be honest with everyone that's here, it's not, people would be happy that the budget's not, and clearly everybody got elected or put on the board for a reason. So I have to be true to the people that come to talk to me about different things. So since everyone won't be here next week, they understand that there's not a huge increase overall, but they also, we have to keep in mind the spending piece of it. That once we
Which is a little
approve,
higher than the mill rate increase. Is that what you're pointing to?
yeah,
Joanne?
I mean, we just want to be fair.
1.4 versus the 0.9.
Or just in general, like you said, like this is a good year with RAM being low and all of those kind of things. So whatever we kind of marry a line to, or decisions that are made down the line, it's harder to take it back once it's come forward.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that's the reason where I, just personally speaking, this is where in years like this, I like to shovel money into capital funds because they're not
100.
operating budget.
Yeah. No, and I understand.
That's literally it. Because you could always adjust that in a way that once you've increased it up budget and then like things grow, it's harder to draw back down. Where, so no, I absolutely hear you. I agree.
So I just think it's a good debate. We've all been put on this board for our beliefs and what we're going to try to do. And, we all want what's best for the town, but I think it's always good to have one open meeting. And I know we've been going line to line and saying, but I've been taking information in, and whoever can be there, it's important that we are there because that's why we're elected and representing what we believe in. Like Rob will always be strong and I'm going to be strong. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
So
Bill, did you have something to say? If I could, you could, Bill.
I was just thinking, if you look at the trend, it's gone pretty down over the last, we were 33.9, 35.87, 31. I mean, we shouldn't, as we look forward, the RAM and the education budget, we know is going to increase because there's going to be an increase in student enrollment. So you have to get realistic. These are the years.
5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you keep trying to go down, it's going to be all the harder to swallow that big increase that's coming down the road. So I think, Rob, you've talked about too, these are the years that you try and get some things done. And then, those things get done and the mill rate is at a reasonable res. Maybe it's 31, maybe it's 32, whatever it is. But when those big increases come, it's not going to hurt as much because you've got a lot of things done. And now you can use that money for the RAM increases or the Board of Ed increases. So to me, when you look at where we were over the last, 33.9, 35.7, listen, I'm not a proponent of big taxes, but this is not a bad mill rate. And I looked at a lot of the towns around Connecticut. This is not a bad mill rate at all. This is
and the reality is that, it interacts with our valuations and
right.
what people are actually
Depends
paying
on the
taxes,
value.
depends on that. But you're absolutely right. And I agree with you on that, in that we have to pick our spots where we can kind of smooth out.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of level loading the expenditures we're going to expend.
There are years, the last thing we want is for everything to come to a head at once and go to the town with some ridiculous, 10% increase.
Right.
We don't want to do
Louise
that.
is out. And I agree with you guys. This is why I like healthy debate or talking about it. Because I see your vision and I understand it. And I'm also trying to align it with a few of the things that I believe in too. So we're all going to have
we should definitely keep, our nickels and dimes in a row and not overspend. I mean, that's
only because
no question.
That's who put me on the board. People,
Yeah.
I had the people.
Louise, you got a comment? Guys, if I could let her speak.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Sorry.
Louise.
We're just we don't think we're getting anything substantive here. So
yeah, my question is to Eric. As far as the culverts, do you anticipate anything coming down the pike that will probably use the extra money that we might end up putting into that?
Oh, so the next one after this, so the first thing is I don't want to spend any more of, I want to grant fund as much of the cost of replacing culverts as I can. So primarily we've been looking at applications to the what's called the state local bridge program. I have looked at a couple other funding sources. Unfortunately, most of the other federal and state funding sources all require roads to be at least minor collectors, which is a problem for us because we don't have the traffic volume to justify that category. So given that, we're looking at getting projects qualified and into the state local bridge program and writing grant applications for that. And then as soon as we get one in, working to come up with enough capital to pay our half of it, because the state pays half and we pay half. I don't want to pay the full cost of any large culvert project because they're just too damn expensive. We're in a lot better shape than a lot of people because we at this point, every large bridge that we have is either redone since the mid 80s, or is already in the federal local bridge program with 100% funding. So compared to most municipalities, we're actually doing great. So there's some doom and gloom, but it's not nearly as bad as most towns. And we haven't had any major washouts because we've been very proactive. But after this one, we are going to have to do the one on Bear Swamp Road because that one is failing. The whole bottom of the barrel is eaten away. And we've been getting sinkholes on that road, which we've patched and we've dealt with. And, we might have to do a more extensive repair similar to what we did on Bunker Hill Bridge, but that one can't go another 10 years. I mean, sometime in that period, we're going to replace it. So the goal is to get through Lake Road as fast as we can and immediately start socking away money for Bunker Hill.
Bunker.
We do have one thing going for us, and that in about 4 years after Long Hill Bridge has been replaced, we will have a pool of money that we can repurpose for bridges and culverts, because the money we've been putting into the bridge fund for Bunker Hill Bridge, once Bunker Hill is done, we'll use that money for the Long Hill Bridge, but then we should get all of that back. And we can use that for culverts. So in other words, what I'm telling you is at the rate we're going, we're going to be able to fund Lake Road at Basola, and we're going to be able to use a significant portion of money the town already has that's currently locked up in a bridge fund that we have to do to pay, because the way these programs work is that we're obligated to pay the contractor and then we get money back from the state and federal government. So even though it's 100% funded, we still have to lay out the money and then wait to get it back. But eventually, once we've gotten it all back, we will be able to turn around and reuse that money for our culverts, if that makes sense.
Yep.
What's your take on adding money into that particular fund right now? Going up
I think it makes sense if you think you can get it through the budget.
Okay.
And that's really the bottom line. Should that fund, should it be higher? Yes. And that's one
What's possible.
Yeah.
So it's I agree, and I like all those points. What I guess I was basically saying, when we look at this page, if we're all not going to be here next week, we've got 600,000. We're asking an increase in spending for the town. And I'm not saying any of this is wrong. I see then you got this school, per the usual, which is understandable. And then we're actually using the fund balance this year. So that's another 150. So spending in general is up a lot. So we're just asking the town to digest the spending. So
Yeah,
We'll go back to it next week, but
it is up almost, if I'm looking at this right, total back taxation is up by almost $1 million. So that's
Mm.
real.
Mhm.
You know, and one thing I would add to that is that there has been frustration at times in town that we fund the town at such a minimal level and everything gets thrown at ed funding, which, you know, hey, I got 2 kids. I don't mind that necessarily, but it is a thing. And here we are, we're taking the opportunity to kind
Yeah.
of turn the tables on that. So that would be my
Yeah.
argument. But that said, I too do not want in any way to lock us into higher spending that we then flail around with 3 years from now or something. I don't want to do that. Which is why I focus on the capital. So
True
that's
enough.
all. That's all.
Yeah. No, good points, because that can be adjusted if need be when there's emergencies in other areas.
Right.
No, it's all just good thoughts. And then we're all going to have to circle back to what we truly believe in next week and then just go from there.
Yeah,
But I
see
just
what we
wanted,
feel we want to bring before the town, right? I mean,
right.
that's our last meeting before we bring this
Mhm.
before the public.
I've just had points brought to me that they know that, of course, the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed are going to bring their highest and best budgets to us, of course, and they want the Board of Finance to do their due diligence instead of just passing it into, which we always do. So that's all in full transparency. So if we all have that food for thought of our overall thoughts, I mean, last week there was debates about the community center and the director, so we have to circle back to that. You know, before, you know, whether we're going to leave everything on the table until the town, maybe that is the final decision. So, yeah, just one more good discussion about things and bring maybe things to the table that people are not quite sure of or want to make any adjustments or entertain talk about it anyways, is my thought. Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
good for now. I
there's
don't know about you,
nothing
I'm
Mark.
good.
solid. We're not
I'm
going to make
good.
any motions. Anybody want to make a
Not
motion to
tonight.
adjourn?
You don't have to go to the airport tonight, do you?
No.
Yeah.
I will be at the airport next week, though, when I'm supposed to be
I'm
there.
going to be I have to take my mother to the airport Friday morning, so I feel your pain. Uh, anyway, yes, I will move to adjourn.
I'll second that emotion.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion?
No.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Any
Hey,
opposed?
oh, sorry.
Any abstentions? Okay, thanks much. I will
Joanne,
send
can you hang
to
out for
each
1
of
second?
you this updated spreadsheet, and as I said, I won't be in the